Good afternoon and welcome to Archaeology Today, the show where we examine America's prehistory from the ground up. I'm your host, Jaimie Trussell, and joining me today is Dr. Monty Dobson, archaeologist, adventurer, and raconteur. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, Jaimie, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Reading your biography, it's like a childhood dream come true. Can you tell me a little bit of what drew you to the field of archaeology and about some of the experiences you've had?
Sure. I'm kind of an accidental archaeologist. I came to it by way of my research when I was doing my master's degree up at Central Michigan University. I started looking at early medieval monasticism in Anglo-Saxon England, and I wanted to know more about these places that I was reading about in sources like Bede and the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. And so as I started looking around, I realized that if I was ever going to actually be able to answer the kind of questions that I wanted to ask in a dissertation, I was going to have to come to grips with the archaeology and learn to work with that as a resource in addition to the historical documents. So went to York and studied there and did the PhD in sort of monumentality and burial and monuments in the early medieval period.
So it sounds like you started as a scholar and then went to the field. I know from my own experience, fieldwork was a lot more like ditch digging and a lot less like Indiana Jones. What were some of the most surprising aspects to you about getting out of the classroom and into the field?
I think for me it was just really what drew me to it, and really it was kind of returning to something I loved as a kid, is just getting out and sort of investigating and finding things. And so what I experienced when I went out to the field and started working with archaeology and doing excavations is that there was really that fascination of discovery, and you never know from one day to the next what you're going to find. For me, working in the north of England, even in the middle of June, it's raining sideways and sleet, so bad weather and cold was part of the hazards.
Remember it well.
Yeah.
Those are very complex issues, and I know a lot of archaeology is esoteric to the average person. What do you find as a challenge of presenting your research to the general public and making them as interested in it as you are?
Sure. I think we have the best stories in history to tell. And so it's incumbent on us as academics to really be able to tell good stories and engage people's interests. So I think in some ways you've got to remember the audience is different. You can't deliver a popular presentation in the same way and with the same content that you're going to do an academic paper. They're just different audiences. And that's kind of basic storytelling. You really have to pay attention to the craft of storytelling.
What are some of the favorite stories you like to tell? What are some of the discoveries that you've made that you want to be sure everyone knows when you're gone?
I think when going back to the types of things I've looked at in my research and early medieval the evolution of early medieval kingdoms in Anglo-Saxon Northumbria, what I really think is important is that if we take the sort of popular or at least the academic history, and then we look particularly in a historical period, and you look at the archaeology and compare that to what's being said in the documents, we can get a sense of what people are actually doing. The people who write history are writing the story of the people who won the debate. But if we look to the archaeology, we can start to pick out the ideas that maybe had currency in their day but didn't win the arguments. And I think that's the important thing that I would like to communicate to people, is that there are other stories that are out there that haven't been written, and our job as archaeologists is to give the people who wrote those stories a voice.
Well, I'm very glad, for one, that you are there representing those points of view. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Jaimie.
And thank you for joining us. Till next time, enjoy the archaeology in your world.